Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to Guide Adventures. My name is Guy, and we are now in the ideation or the adventure creation process for the dinosaur-inspired videos that we explored last week. Weren't those monsters truly colossal? They really were. What do we have to do to create this adventure around these gigantic beasts? Remember, all of this was inspired by the Kickstarter Trail of the Behemoth, which was successfully funded and still has late pledges open if you want to go and pick up a copy of those rules. Now, those rules are custom designed for Trail of the Behemoth, and they're really cool. But I wanted to translate them into D&D 5th edition, or 5.24. Well, it wasn't a translation, it was a complete creation of brand new stuff, as I am wont to do, and as happens. Now, these rules grew and grew and grew and grew, and then shrunk down again and grew again, and I went, well, what do I do? How do I create a set of rules that are going to make monsters truly terrifying, but more than just the monsters that are in the monsters manual? What needs to be done? Well, there's quite a lot that needed to be done at the end of it all. And I'm going to be taking you through what exactly it is that I came up with. And of course, all of these rules will be available to the patrons at the end of the month of July. So make sure that you become a Patreon as soon as you can if you want to grab a copy of these monster rules, as well as, of course, the adventure that we end up creating. Remember to hit that like button, or to subscribe to the channel, or to click on the little bell icon, and that will notify you when new videos drop for this channel. Some people don't get the notifications. Possibly it's because you haven't clicked on the little bell. With the inspiration of having truly colossal creatures, I needed to work out how to do it. Now, I had already done a basic system for the Complete Guide to Nautical Campaigns, which was a book that I released a very long time ago, on 5th edition rules for combat, naval combat specifically. And in that, I realized that ships were going to be doing a lot of damage. Now, with our new rule set for locations, armies, and ships, I realized that ships are doing even more damage, locations are doing even more damage, so a dragon attacking a castle will decimate that dragon in a heartbeat if it's a standard castle as according to the locations rules that I've created, the scale idea, you see. So I thought, well, we'll just make monsters on a scale system. And boy, oh boy, did that suddenly open up a wonderful, beautiful Pandora's box, which I was happy to open. So let's jump into those basic rules. So monsters all have a scale, and the scale starts at scale 2 and then works its way up, mainly because monsters all have to have a head and a body. I couldn't think of any option where that never existed. There's got to be some kind of neural center, some congregation of nerve endings, if you will, a cephalization of nerves. Something has to represent the creature's brain functions, and then something has to be the body that houses all this stuff in. So a minimum of scale 2, and then they scale up from there. And of course, the scale of the monster determines all sorts of weird and wonderful things. The scale of the monster also determines the weight of the monster, and we're talking thousands of pounds here. And the scale changes once the monster gets to scale 10. It sort of suddenly starts to double in terms of the weight, as well as in terms of the length of the creature. We saw with the dinosaurs that creatures like T-Rex or Gigantosaurus or Gigantosaurus, or however you want to pronounce it, we saw those creatures as standing really tall. And that starts to create some interesting questions. Armor class becomes very problematic, because if you've got a 60-foot long creature, that is 12 squares on the grid. That's colossal. That is truly titanic. Dragons are gargantuan, but they don't get to 60 feet as far as D&D is concerned. And when you look at the monsters the dinosaurs in the monsters manual, they're pathetic little nobodies, and the distance of them is irrelevant. Determining the scale of the monster then also determines its size and determines the different hit points and the armor classes for various components that make up that monster. And those we call attributes, and those attributes are things like head, legs, body, tail, wings, spines, armor plating. There's just a whole list of things that you can assemble to create your monster. And as you are putting those together, the scale of the monster increases and increases and increases. And it gives us the opportunity to then have these really long, very tall, very big creatures. And that's really useful. D&D also does not take into account height. There's never any kind of question of hitting the dragon's head without having differential armor classes for different locations. It kind of just makes it a single blob that you have to hit, and its actual shape is irrelevant. And this doesn't work for Titanic Monsters. They need to have these areas that you can reach and that you can't reach. And so again, the scale allows us for that, and it also gives us a good opportunity to help create some use for the battlefield. Apart from it just being this great big square arena, you go, well, if you attack a monster from above it, you get advantages on your attacks because the creature can't see where you're coming from. That's something that's pretty cool. Okay, so now the terrain becomes important, or having aerial advantage becomes quite cool as well. So it gives us some interesting things to look at. But then you go, but if you're attacking from height, that means you have a fall damage as well. So bear that in mind. If whatever you're using to fly suddenly stops working. One of the attributes that you can give to your monster is a magical ability. And these are catch-alls. These are broad category things that the creatures can do. And I kind of broke it down into things like movement, defenses, trickery, cunning, stuff that monsters traditionally have. Because again, I'm drawing inspiration from all of the monsters that we know about and that we've seen and that we've encountered and that sort of thing. And so your monster can have magical abilities over and above its basic abilities. Each magical ability, though, increases its scale by 1. So you can have a really tiny little creature, but it's got a very big scale because of the amount of magic that it can throw out. Again, this is not looking at how one builds monsters in the Monsters Manual or using the D&D rules. These are using these custom designed rules. So your monsters can have these magical abilities, which are really, really, really fun and change up things quite importantly. With all of that in place, then your scale determines the armor class of the creature, and your locations have armor class modifiers, so that if you're trying to hit the head, yes, you are hitting the head. The head has a higher armor class, but less hit points. And when you disable the head, when you reduce the head down to 0 hit points, it can no longer use things like breath weapons. It's blinded. It gets a reduced number of attacks. If you reduce the limbs down to 0, its speed is reduced. If you reduce the wings down to 0, it can't fly. All of this was just because I was thinking, well, it allows you to change up the encounters. So instead of the king saying, go forth and slay that dragon, the king now would say, go forth and bring me back a living dragon. But it mustn't be able to fly away, because I'll be very sad. So now the PCs have to defeat this dragon without actually killing this dragon. And that's entirely possible with this location system. So that was really exciting. But then you go, okay, well, the amount of damage that these things are doing is phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. But the bigger the creature gets, we saw with Alamosaurus that thing is so big that I would be like a chihuahua. And you as a human trying to kick a chihuahua, you might get lucky. And if you do, you're a horrid person, but at the same time, that chihuahua is going to take a lot of damage and is going to fly through the air. At the same time, if it's actively trying to avoid you, chances are it probably will. Ever tried to swat a fly? They seem to move really quickly. So there are some penalties for scaled creatures. The bigger the scale, the less likely they are to hit you. They still have phenomenal chances of hitting you, like plus 12 in certain circumstances, even more. But it's not plus 22, which is what they have to hit other scaled objects like buildings or ships and so forth. Once you go, well, we've got these different body parts, we've got these different bits and pieces, these attributes, and each one of them does a different thing. I slay the monster. What do I then do with the monster? Well, I want to take organs. I want to take parts from that monster. Because these monsters are not interested in assembling hordes of treasure. These are titanic beings. They don't need to have mounds of gold. That might happen accidentally. It might be a byproduct of what they eat. maybe it is what they eat, but that's not going to be their primary focus. They're not going to lift up a tiny little magical breastplate and go, ooh, look, shiny. That's not going to interest them, not in the slightest. They themselves needed to become the treasure. And so what I did then okay, well, each body part, each tribute has a series of parts. Some have got multiple parts, some have only got one type of part, and there are 8 different types of parts. Fluids, organs, membrane, bones, meat, that sort of thing. And then there's some special parts as well, glands and things like that you really kind of want to harvest. I didn't want to go too prescriptive, though, in terms of exactly what it is, because you might build a monster and go, well, it doesn't have a gland, it's got a third stomach, or it doesn't have eyeballs, it's got these multifaceted sensory organs. So instead of listing them as eyeballs, heart, liver, that sort of minutiae, it's more like organs, fluids, membranes, more generic kind of catchphrases. So these all have got a value, an intrinsic value, in terms of being able to sell them, hence the monster becoming a treasure. But then you go, well, you also need to know how long it's going to take you to harvest these things, because if there's 2 giant monsters fighting, one of them falls over, you can't just rush over and loot the corpse and end up with 4 tons worth of salvageable body parts. Each one takes a certain amount of time, it takes a certain skill that you're going to have to roll in order to actually harvest that thing. And of course, once you've done that, you then go, well, you know what? You need to be able to craft stuff out of the stuff that you've harvested, because selling it is fine, but who doesn't want to have cool monster hide armor or a spear that you've made out of the tooth of this gigantic 100-foot tall beast? That's cool stuff, man. We got to include that kind of stuff. So I then created some crafting rules on how you can craft using different components, the amount of time it takes to craft them, the skill it takes in order to actually do the craft, repercussions of failing your skill challenge and all that kind of stuff. And, well, then you kind of need to have some assistance. You might be able to hire some assistants. They'll help you harvest the monster faster. So that's important too. And what it does is it creates this wonderful opportunity for the PCs, if they really want to have like a wagon train following behind them. Because you think about it, you're going to go and kill a 45-ton monster. 45 tons of meat. How are you transporting this exactly? I know that most people don't keep track of weight allowance these days, but 45 tons of bone, meat, fluids, organs, etc. So there's also a requirement of what containers you need to have in order to be able to transport these things, and how much each container can have. And it's not realistic by any stretch of the imagination, but it is representative. And what that does is, again, it gives the players, it gives the DM, and it gives the PCs opportunities for coolness. We don't have any barrels. Oh, can I make a barrel? Sure, go ahead, make a barrel. You're not a Cooper, but sure, go ahead. It's going to take you a day. So there's opportunities for the party having to do stuff. There's opportunities for downtime now, and that downtime to be really, really, really useful. So I think that that's pretty much the rules. It sounds much, much simpler than when I was actually creating them, because as you're writing them, you're like, oh, I need to add that. Oh, I need to add this. Oh, I need to add that. And I'm very happy with how they've turned out. And when you look at the monsters that they've created, they are truly, truly terrifying. Even a little scale 4 monster, almost the smallest that you can get, is throwing out some terrifying damage. A little scale 4 monster, look at that. It's got a strength of 14, constitution of 12, wisdom of 4, dexterity of 11, intelligence of 2, charisma of 1. There's a system on how you come up with those sort of things. Base hit points of 225 and an armor class of 14 on general. It's doing 2 attacks a round. Each attack has +6 to hit and does on average 21 points of damage. So it's not a lot of damage, 2d10 plus 11. So 2 attacks, that's pretty good. Now, there you can see the breakdown of the different armor classes, of the different areas and the different hit points of those different areas as well. And so that you can see also what happens to the creature once certain parts have got to a certain value. And it has a weakness. That was something that I realized all monsters needed to have, because if they didn't have weaknesses, it was just a slogfest. And then I realized, well, just giving it a weakness is a little bit boring from a player perspective. That's always what I'm thinking about, is what are the players doing to gain these advantages, to find out these weaknesses. So there's two ways that players can discover the weakness of a creature. One, and it's listed on the creature itself, is go and do some research. They go to the library. We have a library montage of them researching, speaking to the librarians, speaking to local guides, going to the blacksmith. Have you heard any rumors about the weakness of this creature? Engaging in roleplay to find out information on this thing. Or once they've started fighting it, they can then make an insight or a perception check to then say, oh, hang on a moment, whenever so-and-so does that, this happens. Because sometimes players in the middle of combat, they're not really paying attention to what each other are doing. They think about what they're going to be doing on the next turn. Here is an opportunity for you as the DM to say, hey, well, you've all been in the battle for 2 rounds. Hey, wouldn't you just give me a perception check? Oh, you notice that every time that so-and-so hits it with their silvered weapon, it recoils more than when other person hits it with their non-silvered weapon. It's things like that. And then the weaknesses often are you have advantage on your attack rolls, or you're doing double damage and things like that. When you go up to scale, let's say, 15, you end up with a 700-foot-long, 240,000-pound monster. I think that the system works really well, and I would love your feedback. Once you get a copy of these rules, have a play and see and go, well, actually, these are insane, or are they too weak? There's always that risk as well. I've played a couple of these monsters against not a full party of PCs. I don't happen to have a stable of players just sitting waiting for me to finish writing these rules and then hand them over to them. But I'd love your feedback. That's how these things get better. That's how these things grow. And we'll take it from there. So now we've got the rules on the monsters that we need to create. Normally I'd say, right, let's make some maps. Not this time around. This time around we're creating the adventure first, and then we are going to go and create the maps to support the adventure, because we don't know what maps we need. I love that kind of process of how adventures are dynamic in their creation. Anyway, just a reminder, go and check out Trail of the Behemoth if you'd rather have a standalone monster hunting rule set. As I said, it's really cool, it flows, it's very, very nice. And I'm actually commissioned to write one of the adventures that goes into the final product. So that should be a lot of fun. Big thank you to them for inspiring this video. Of course, a huge thank you to my patrons who, as I said before, will get a copy of this adventure and these rule sets at the end of the month. And for you to watching all the way until the very end. Until next time, I wish you and yours the happiest of adventure creation.